Okay, so this is the second part of the presentation on quoting, and I'm beginning with a review of the 5 quotes I presented before. The first one was a full sentence quotation. I have underlined the quotations here. It has the introduction, and it has attributive verb, and then a comma, and then the quote. The second type of quotation that I presented to you was a partial sentence quote. I underlined it here. This is the introduction. It does not have a capital. There is no comma here. It's just a part of a sentence. And so this is a partial sentence quote. The third type of quote that I introduced to you the first time was an interrupted quote, where part of the quote is presented and then followed by the introduction. Something the writer says in the middle, and then the second part of the quote. So this quote is interrupted by the introduction being in the middle. That's the third type of quote I presented to you. Monica?
When you have like an interval quote, you need a comma, or it's because it has a comma?
Good point. 2 commas. 2 commas. One after the first part and one before the second part. 2 commas are needed. Good point. Thank you. The fourth type of quote was a quotation in which we change one or more words in the quote, or we take out words in the quote. But this is a quote where I changed the verb. In the original, I believe it was pushing, and I changed it to push, and so I put pushed in brackets. Anytime that we take out something, we can put brackets and then the ellipses.
Also, when you add another word, you can put that.
Yes, when you add another word. When you add a word that's not in the quotation. In fact, I'll show you one today in one of my examples. So this is a quote that you change because you want it to fit into your sentence, and you need to indicate what you changed in brackets. And I believe the fifth type of quote was a quote that includes words that are quoted in the article, in the original material. And so this quote, this is a full sentence quotation. The words "third world conditions" were quoted in the article. Harkinson put those words in quotations. And so if I wanted to use this sentence in my paper, then I have to put "third world conditions" I have to indicate that with single quotation marks, and then I have to close the quotation with double quotation marks. I begin with double quotations, and I have to end with double quotations. But the words that are quoted in the article, "third world conditions," those are within single quotation marks. So those were the 5 quotations that I covered. Douglas?
So how about if we just bring the quote that is already quoted in the article, and then we just bring that, it's gonna be like double?
Yes, and it's gonna be double. You would have double quotation marks right here, double quotation marks right here, and it's confusing because the reader might think that you have two quotations. If I do it like you say, then a reader may think that this is a separate quote, third world conditions, and it gets confusing.
No, what I mean is like if in the article third world condition it's already quoted, then I just bring that to my composition.
Good point. But not the rest.
Not the rest.
Very good point. Very good point. Then you would not use single quotations. If what you are saying is this: if I take all this out and somehow I just put third world conditions, that's all I want to use, third world conditions, then no problem, because you are not quoting anything else, and so even though this had double quotation marks in the original article, you can give it double quotation marks because you are not quoting anything else. So that would be okay. That would be okay. All right. So the new type of quote that I want to introduce now is the quote where the writer quotes another person in the article. And in part 3, Harkinson quotes like 6 or 7 people. He quotes Linda Rasnick. He quotes ex-governor Schwarzenegger. And he quotes a worker from the wonderful company. He quotes different people. And so when you quote the words of someone that the author quoted, then we have to mention the person. And in my first example, the person is the chairman of the Kern Water Bank Authority. He is the chairman. And he says that the Kern Water Bank enable us to plant permanent crops. I wanted to quote the words of this man. So if I don't mention this person, and I just mentioned that Harkinson writes, or Harkinson stated, the Kern Water Bank enable them, if I want to change it, enable them to plant permanent crops, that would appear that these words belong to Harkinson. But they don't belong to Harkinson. Harkinson is quoting them. So I have to mention this person to tell the reader, hey, these words come from this person that Harkinson quoted. Okay? And I put these 2 words in this blue box to indicate to you how important they are. Because when you are mentioning someone that the author quotes, then you have to say, Harkinson quotes Schwarzenegger as saying. Harkinson quotes Governor Jerry Brown as saying. As saying. We don't say Harkinson quotes Governor Jerry Brown that he said. No.
So all the time you have to use as saying in that case?
If you are quoting yes, if you are quoting
like a third person?
Yes, a third person. My second example has a person is not quoted. Harkinson is summarizing an investigation by a newspaper. And so I mentioned that Harkinson is summarizing the investigation of that. And in that, I don't use as saying because Harkinson does not quote. He summarizes. He summarizes. But if you're going to use the quote of a person that the author quoted, then these 2 words are key. These 2 words are key. On Tuesday, when I had you write examples, only one group used these. And so we need to, and I'll be showing you those examples. Okay? All right. So this is the first example. And I want to give this example again just to show you that you can insert some words. In this case, right after authority. This person works for the Resnicks. The chairperson of the Kern Water Bank Authority also works for the Resnicks. He's the vice president of the wonderful company. And, I thought that was important information, so using brackets, I put it in there. But you can see, this is still in there. Okay, so my second example is a summary that Harkinson does of the conclusions, the findings of an investigation conducted by the Contra Costa Times. And this investigation revealed that's my introduction, and this is a quote. These are not the words of somebody else. These are Harkinson's words. But since they come from this investigation, I want to explain, I want to mention where that material comes from. And so this is an example of that. And then this is the quote, that between these 2 years, the Resnicks bought water for potentially as little as $28 per acre, and then they sold it for as much as $196 per acre back to the state, and the state needed the water to supply other farmers whose supply had been previously curtailed. So this is different from the first one because this is a summary of a newspaper investigation that Harkinson mentions. Now, I have other examples. I want to show you those. They come from, they're in the second page of the agenda, and these are the examples. This is from an article written by a man or person. The writer's last name was Hammond. And according to Hammond, this is an article about education. According to Hammond, Vice Principal Vicki Lindberg admits that, and then these are her words, Lindberg's words, re-examining teaching practices was uncomfortable at first. However, Hammond also quotes Lindberg as saying, here are the words that I want you to pay close attention to. Hammond quotes Lindberg as saying, teachers like to be individuals. But once the trust started to build, I would hear teachers say, you know, grammar is not my forte. Help me with this. You notice, these are the words that this person said, the vice principal. And the words that she said included the words of other teachers. So again, this is a quote within a quote. And that's why I have single quotation marks beginning with you know. You know, grammar is not my forte. Help me with this. Single quotation mark to close the words of that teacher, and then double quotation marks to close the original quotation. That makes sense? Okay, so this is the important part, as saying.
As saying, it is important to say like quotes or not?
Yeah, no, you have to.
Also quotes and the name and...
Yes. Quotes Lindberg as saying. So maybe I should have put the blue box on all of it. Quotes this person as saying. Okay? The second example is from another article. This article was written by a person named Manzo. And so I wrote, Manzo quotes an English teacher who describes as sobering the fact that such a small proportion of students can produce effective, fully developed writing. Now, Douglas asked if every time you have to use quotes this person as saying. Not every time. Here, this word belongs to, and these words belong to the English teacher. And Manzo quotes them. But I don't say as saying, because first, this person describes as sobering the fact that such a small proportion of students can produce effective, fully developed writing. So in this example, I did not use as saying, because I wanted to mention how the word that this person used to describe this fact. Okay? But there's a second There's a second example here. She also quotes Christopher T. Cross, the president of the Washington-based Council for Basic Education, as saying that the NAEDP scores are an indication of our failure to teach writing. Okay? So here I do use as saying, but here I did not. So sometimes maybe you will not use as saying, but I think that 90% of the time you will. Okay? So this is the sixth type of quote. The sixth type of quote. And the last one, the seventh type of quote, I have to go back to PowerPoint. The last type of quote that we're going to study is the block quote or an extended quote, which is a quote that in the original document is 4 lines or longer. 4 lines or longer. Okay, so these are the long quotes. And these quotes, they require 5 things. These 5 things. They require, first of all, a valid reason for using a long quote. You cannot just put a long quote because you want to make your paper longer. You have to have a very good reason to use it. These quotes are indented 10 spaces. 10 spaces. Okay? You know how we indent paragraphs 5 spaces, right? We indent paragraphs 5 spaces. But these quotes are indented double. 10 spaces. Okay? And they're written double spaced, just like the rest of your lines. No quotation marks are used. No quotation marks are used. And the parenthetical citation goes after the period. After the period. And this is my first example. This is my introduction. Parkinson also summarizes the findings of an investigation by the Contra Costa Times, which revealed that, and then I have the same quote, but I added another sentence which made it longer. And that's why I needed to put this as a block quote or an extended quote. You can see that this is 10 spaces. 10 spaces. And here's the quote, and it ends with the couple pocketed more than $30 million in the process. No quotation marks. This is not the beginning of the sentence in the original. This is not the beginning of the sentence, so I don't have a capital letter. Okay? And there are no quotation marks. It's double spaced. Here, I left out some of the words. There was a parenthesis that said, it explained how much is a per acre, what is a per acre foot of water? An acre foot of water. And that explained that in parentheses. I left it out. I indicate that with these ellipses. Okay? So, 10 spaces, a long quote.
So, even though we are now doing the, like for example, if we are doing just a summary without
your own words.
Yeah, double space, like use
yes.
a single space. So in this case, use the quotes is gonna be double space, and then the rest will be.
No, your papers, your summaries have been double spaced.
No, what I'm saying, because you asked for double space, but some teachers will not ask for double space.
Well, English teachers will, because we all follow the rules of the Modern Language Association. And before, like in the 1950s and 1960s, when I went to college, the long quotes were single spaced. They were single spaced. But they changed the rule. And now they're double spaced just like the rest of the text.
Okay. If you go back to the indication, so in 5.
Yes.
With in the number 2, it said then the first line is also indented 3 spaces.
Yes. Good point. So I think I have. No, I don't. This is also a partial sentence quote.
Does that mean it's only if it's the entire sentence?
No, no. If the sentence comes from the beginning of a paragraph. So let me give you an example. I have the part 3, I believe. Here is part 3. So I'm going to take a sentence from the beginning of a paragraph. This one. I'm just going to take, but I need more. I need more to make it
That's fine.
Okay. So I take this and I go back to here. And I'm going to put it, let's say that I'm going to put it here. Instead of this quote, I'm going to put the one that I just typed in. Okay. I just have to increase the font. Oops. I think it's 32. Okay. So, this sentence comes from the beginning of a paragraph. And because it comes from the beginning of a paragraph, then I indent the quote 3 spaces.
So if we get it from the middle of the paragraph,
No.
it doesn't matter if the sentence is start there, it's gonna be
Straight.
Okay.
If it comes from the middle of the paragraph, it's going to look like that.
okay.
Okay? All right. So this is begins at the beginning of a sentence, but mine did not. Mine did not. I think you can remember in the article the section that describes the Kern water bank. And so I think that this is important information. Maybe this part could be cut out. I can show you, in Kern County. So if we took this out, brackets, makes it a little shorter, but I think it would still be longer than 4 lines. Okay, so again, no quotation marks, double space, and the parenthetical goes after the period. The parenthetical goes after the period. Okay, so these then are the 2 examples of block quotes or extended quotes. This was the first one, and this is the second one. So those were the new types of quotes. And so I want to finish by reminding you of the 20% limit on quotation space. You cannot have more than 20% of your paper be composed of quotations. So that means that you have to select your quotes carefully. And also, I'm sure you're learning that to integrate quotations into sentences effectively, it takes practice. It takes practice using the attributive verbs. And so we're practicing doing that. Okay? All right, very good. So